To Senator John Thune right now, the Senate Minority Whip. Senator, always good to have you. You think inviting senators, or at least extending this beyond the president and the speaker, is essentially a waste of time, right?
Well, I guess what I would tell you, Neil, is that in the end, anybody that's in that room, other than the Speaker of the House and the President of the United States, probably is somewhat extraneous to what needs to be done here. This has to be a deal that's negotiated between Speaker McCarthy on behalf of the Republican majority in the House of Representatives and the President, who ultimately would have to sign a bill into law. The Senate's role, obviously, would come into play if and when there's a deal that would have to be voted on in the Senate. But until they reach agreement, I think for all intents and purposes, the Senate really is, we're observers to this at the moment. We'll have a role at some point, but for now, it's got to be a two-way conversation between the Speaker and the President.
Now, Senator, I caught your remarks earlier when you were speaking to the press with Mitch McConnell and what have you, that 7 out of 10 times we've been in this sort of situation, there have been some budgetary adjustments. But this is one of those rare occasions, maybe by design, sir, where Republicans in the House pushing this want an immediate quid pro quo. We raise the debt ceiling, these spending cuts go into effect. That's never been done. That's what has the rankling that you're getting from the White House. Where's the middle ground on this?
There have been, the Budget Control Act in 2011, came out of conversations around this topic and ultimately led to spending reductions. What the House is trying to achieve here.
It didn't immediately, right, Senator? I guess the only reason why I'm getting in nuance like this is that's where Democrats say, no, they're trying to play a whole different game here. What is the game, or if you want to call it, what's the procedure going forward that you think would work?
I think that sitting down and actually negotiating out something that would represent meaningful attempt to address the debt itself. What they want is simply just to increase the debt, keep on spending, keep on borrowing, keep on taxing. And what I try to point out today, Neil, is if you look at the next 10 budget years, every dollar we borrow, 50 cents of that is going to be used to pay interest alone. Wow. And if you look at the amount that we're paying for interest, in 2010, we paid a little under $200 billion a year in interest on the debt. In 2022, we paid $475 billion just in interest on the debt. That's a 142% increase in that short amount of time. This isn't sustainable. We have got to do something to address the debt. And what House Republicans and what Senate Republicans supporting them are saying is, look, this is a divided government. It requires negotiation. You want to increase in the debt limit. Let's do something about the debt and incorporate some spending reforms and some budgetary restraint as part of that process.
All right. Where Democrats say this is a non-starter, senators, this idea of setting discretionary spending levels at 2022 levels, say that it's not going to happen. Limiting spending growth to no more than 1% a year, not going to happen. This is from Chuck Schumer. Even talk of clawing back $100 billion in unspent COVID money, not going to happen. Now that one was a reasonable request because the money's unspent. It just makes me wonder about whether any deal could be had before June 1st. And are you afraid that, if both sides are stuck in their positions here, we're going to default?
And that doesn't need to happen. It can't happen. And for that not to happen, the president has got to step up to the plate and do what 65% of the American people want him to do, and that is negotiate spending restraint. 58% of Democrats agree with that. And if you look at some of the things, you mentioned it, clawing back unspent COVID dollars, why is that hard? And that yields immediate savings. There are dollars you could save right today. They're talking about work requirements in some of these government programs, particularly for able-bodied adults without children. I think that's a sensible reform. Talking about permitting reform to make it easier to get energy projects cited and permitted in this country and start lowering the cost of energy, make us less dependent upon foreign energy. Those are all, I think, reasonable, should be bipartisan items that as they sit down at the table, they ought to be able to negotiate out. Now, I, for one, think we also ought to have the spending, restraints in there in the future, the things that the House has talked about. But there are things on which there ought to be agreement. But the fact of the matter is, they cannot one, ignore it, and that's an unsustainable position to say we're not going to negotiate, or two, come to the table and say it's a clean debt limit or else. That's not where the American people are. That's not where the country is right now. We're $31 trillion in debt and spending almost half a trillion a year on interest on payments on the debt. We've got to start drawing some lines here and start getting this situation under control, and that starts with these negotiations between the president and the speaker.
You know, I'm so old, Senator, I remember when it crossed $1 trillion debt with Ronald Reagan. And I thought that was such an incomprehensible number. But I'm much older than you, Senator, so I'm just wondering, what the heck?
You're not a lot older, Neil.
It's all right. You're just handling it better. But, Senator, thank you very, very much. We'll see where this goes. But, man, we are getting close to something. Senator John Thune on that.